Islam Makhachev is looking to make history and become one of the greatest of all time by moving up to middleweight and beating Dricus Du Plessis, but it will not go like how he expects. So Islam Makhachev has made it clear after beating Money Moicano in the last UFC pay-per-view that he wants to move up to middleweight and he thinks he can beat Dricus Du Plessis at 185. Obviously this is a wild claim as he's going to be jumping 2 weight classes, not just one, and Dricus Du Plessis has beaten a lot of good guys like Israel Adesanya, Sean Strickland, and is no pushover himself.
Yeah, I mean, Islam's chasing greatness for a second belt, but not one at 170, which is the next weight class above him. He's looking to get that middleweight title at 185, 30 pounds bigger than his weight class, and that's a very, very tall task. Ali Abdelaziz, his manager, said that he could take on Alex Pereira, which Islam himself ended up shutting down and being like, no, I'm not going to Alex Pereira's weight. I don't want to look like DC. So even 185 is just way too much for Islam Makhachev to be going up. We've never seen that in a title fight, moving up to fight the champion in 2 weight classes above yours. It's not like Dricus is just like a striker or he can't grapple. He's very well rounded. He's ragdolling guys in the middleweight division. So imagine what he would do to a lightweight who is having competitive fights with Dustin Poirier and Alexander Volkanovski, who's a featherweight at 145. Like, it just doesn't really make sense to go up 2 divisions to fight Dricus. This is a crazy claim, and Dricus has been pretty much saying that Islam doesn't want that, and I tend to agree. I don't know why he would make this move. I guess he wants that second belt, and the only way he would get it if he was going to middleweight because he doesn't want to fight his friend Bilal Muhammad. But I think if Islam wants that second belt, he's better off fighting his friend Bilal because he would actually have a chance in that fight. I feel like he would probably be a favorite against Bilal Muhammad, but middleweight is just way too much.
At the end of the day, props to Islam for wanting to move up all the way to middleweight and want to chase that greatness, being the first person to do it like that. But it just comes down to the weight. Dricus is too fat for him. Islam is a big guy in himself, he cuts a lot of weight, but the weight class Dricus is at is just different. Like you mentioned, Islam has even had some troubles facing some lighter guys like Dustin Poirier, who had a competitive fight with. Obviously he submitted him in the final rounds, but he still had a tough challenge with him. Alexander Volkanovski was able to go toe-to-toe with him in their first matchup. That guy's a featherweight, and they were able to have a very competitive fight, even in all the grappling aspects. Of course, the second fight went differently. Islam was able to knock him out with a crazy head kick, but obviously that was also short notice. But just going off of the facts and what we've seen, of course Islam is pound for pound #1, but that doesn't mean he can go all the way to middleweight and just take that belt.
Yeah, and not to mention Dricus is 2 years younger than Islam, which is kind of crazy. He's in the prime of his career. He's 30 pounds bigger, the 185 champ, and he's stronger. He's well-rounded just like Islam is. Islam does have good striking, but how will that phase a guy that's as big as Dricus, who's the 2 weight classes higher than him, who's the champion of the world, who just submitted Israel Adesanya, who beat the brakes off of Robert Whittaker, beat Sean Strickland via decision. Like, this guy is running through the middleweight division, and mainly just based off of his strength. Like, the guy is an absolute beast. He's a tank. He's running through everyone. So seeing that size against guys that are middleweights like Robert Whittaker and how easily he's taking care of them, how would Islam Makhachev look against Dricus? Probably not that great. It would just be a very, very tough matchup for Islam. Obviously, he's only lost once in his career. He got knocked out when he was coming up, but since then he's looked really good at lightweight, and he is one of the best in the world. Can't deny it. He's probably the pound for pound #1 right now, coming off a win over Money Moicano, which isn't the greatest win, but it was on short notice, 24-hour notice after Arman Tsarukyan pulled out, beating Dustin Poirier, beating Volkanovski, beating Charles Oliveira. On the come up, he had some pretty underrated wins as well, like Arman Tsarukyan and Dan Hooker. So the guy is easily one of the best in the world, but that just doesn't mean he can even compete with Dricus right now, because there's just levels in terms of the weight, and it's too big of a discrepancy to make up with just in skill.
Yeah, and let's not take anything away from Dricus and his insane run. These are high-level guys, and all much bigger than Islam is. Overall, it's very impressive. Islam wants to make this jump and wants to solidify himself as one of the greatest ever, but this just might be too big of a task to actually do.
Look, I get it if it was Bradley Martin, okay? Someone who doesn't train in MMA, who is way bigger than Islam, easily he could take care of him. He'll smash him, brother. But it's different when it's a guy who's trained and is the world champion of the middleweight division. Like, it's not like he's some scrub who Islam's just gonna easily out grapple and ragdoll. Like, no, it's just different, and the size discrepancy matters, especially at this level of MMA. I'd say Dricus would probably stop him because of just how big he is. He's strong, he's well-rounded. Maybe Islam can have a little bit of success on the ground, but I don't even really see that. I don't see how he hurts Dricus. I don't see how he outpoints him to a decision. It's nothing about this matchup is even really close, in my opinion.
Islam could say who give him this black belt to Dustin, but you can't really say that to Dricus, because that grappling would not go in the favor of Islam. Obviously, we know how good Islam is on the ground, how talented he is, how skillful he is, but like we've been saying, it's just the weight. It's hard to grapple at that level for 5 rounds, championship fight, against a guy as skillful as Dricus and come out on top.
Not to mention the gas tank of Dricus. Like, he's a 185er and he's been kind of putting on a high pace on these middleweights, and Islam at 155 has kind of slowed down in a couple of his fights. Like that first fight against Volk, he said he was drained. He said he didn't really get to rehydrate like he wanted in that fight in Australia, but still we've seen Islam slow down. We've seen Dricus obviously slow down a little bit, but his pace in fights is still very high level. So with Islam 30 pounds added onto his frame, how's he gonna look gas tank wise? How's he gonna look cardio wise? Is he gonna be able to compete with the pace of Dricus? This fight just doesn't make sense. I get Islam wanting to chase greatness, but look at that welterweight division. Hopefully he could fight someone like Shavkat Rakhmonov or someone like that if they claim the title. If Bilal Muhammad doesn't end up being champion, then he could definitely fight one of those guys like Shavkat Rakhmonov and try to chase greatness there. But middleweight division, I'd say I'll put it on pause for now. Maybe if it was like an easy stylistic matchup, like let's say Alex Pereira was the champ, maybe then I would understand it, because Alex Pereira just has such a big deficiency in that grappling. I mean, he got taken down by Israel Adesanya. Still, it's a very dangerous matchup. Like, Alex Pereira can knock out anybody. He can definitely knock out Islam, who's way smaller than him, but I would understand it then because the stylistic matchup, you know, Alex isn't well-rounded. He's a kickboxer. He can just grapple. He knows the game plan out there, and the blueprint to beat Alex Pereira is pretty obvious. Just wrestle with him. Just wrestle, brother. But it's not Alex Pereira. It's Dricus Du Plessis, and obviously he's not going to move up to 205 to fight Alex. That would just be insane, and he wouldn't have a chance there either, really.
Now, a difference could be if it's someone like Strickland or Adesanya as the champion who really have deficiencies, or if they're not as dominant, kind of like Strickland is, and there are holes in their game and a path of victory for Islam. But we just seen how well-rounded Dricus is, and the combination of that with how much bigger he is just a bad formula for Islam to try to overcome. It's just kind of unlucky timing. We know that Dricus and Strickland are having a rematch coming up soon. Who knows, maybe if Strickland can win, Islam moves up, he can get that win, he'll become middleweight champion. That would be crazy. But as long as Dricus is currently champion, I just don't see it happening.
And there's just one man stopping that plan, which is Hamza Chimaev, who already is pretty much guaranteed a title shot from Dana White, and would be a horrible stylistic matchup for Islam Makhachev. The only guy I could really see maybe becoming a champion 2 weight classes higher, because he was a welterweight, now moving to middleweight, maybe he could get that light heavyweight belt if he goes up against someone like Alex Pereira, because just the wrestling difference is so vast there, and we've seen Hamza ragdoll all kinds of guys of all kinds of different sizes. So maybe that would be a guy who could do it and pull that off. But Islam against a guy like Dricus who's so well-rounded, I just don't see it. It doesn't really make sense, and Hamza is already big for, he can't even make welterweight anymore, so he can't get that belt anymore. So that hope of being a 3-division champ is kind of gone for him. I don't know. I don't feel like stylistically anything really here benefits Islam. He would just have to have someone who has just such a huge deficiency in their wrestling, which right now the champion is not. It's just not a great matchup.
And maybe another way Islam Makhachev can become double champ still is if Bilal Muhammad loses the welterweight championship and someone that's not his friend finally becomes the champion in that division. Then he can go in there, fight there, have a way higher chance of actually winning that matchup, and becomes double champ. That would be a much more likely opportunity of actually becoming a double champion than going to middleweight, and it just makes a lot more sense. The UFC would much likely book that rather than a middleweight fight, and it just makes more sense overall. So let us know down below if you somehow think Islam Makhachev can beat Dricus Du Plessis, and if you're delusional. But leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the next Punch Talk video.